Les damos una cordial bienvenida en nombre del comité organizador de la CHEC 2020. Mi nombre es Camilo Forero. Les recordamos a los participantes, por favor, mantener sus micrófonos apagados durante la sesión. Cualquier inquietud o pregunta que tengan sobre la temática que les vamos a presentar, les pedimos el favor de que la registren en nuestro chat, acá en Juba o en la aplicación de Zoom, acá en Zoom o en la aplicación de Juba, y que sigan, por favor, las indicaciones del moderador. Los invitamos a estar pendientes de los anuncios y de los foros que hemos publicado para motivar el diálogo entre todos. Los invitamos a visitar nuestros stands virtuales de nuestros expositores, donde podrán interactuar con más de 15 instituciones, incluyendo nuestros patrocinadores Diamante, Oro y Plata. Ustedes en su pantalla pueden escoger la vista que desean, vista para ver al hablador o vista para ver a la galería de personas presentes. Les doy la bienvenida y la palabra a nuestros moderadores. Muchísimas gracias. Adelante, por favor.
Gracias, Camilo. Enga mana, enga reo, enga taia wha, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Well, warm greetings to everyone who is on the session from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm Craig Nicholson, Deputy Director of Latin America CAPE. I started with the traditional mihi, a warm greeting to everyone, where I basically said warm greetings to everyone, all peoples, all languages, all of our ways of being to this session. We look forward to a great hour with you. I'll pass over now to our director, Matthew Omar.
Gracias, Craig, and welcome. Bienvenidos a todos. It's wonderful to have you here. It is 4 a.m. in the morning in New Zealand, so if we look a little tired, please forgive us. This is a presentation on behalf of the Latin America Center of Asia Pacific Excellence. This is a new entity, 3 years old, in New Zealand, created in New Zealand. It was actually a government initiative. It was created by a previous government which said that New Zealand's economic future is on the Pacific Rim. And if you see at the very bottom of the screen there, there's New Zealand just above one of the university logos. We're a Pacific country, but the government decided that New Zealanders didn't know enough about the language, culture, and business practices of our Pacific Rim neighbors. And so it called for creation of these centers. There are 3 of them, and they're all managed by half of New Zealand universities, the 4 you see on your screen. The center is created primarily to look at specific audiences, small and medium businesses, the education system, and the public. A key thing to note is that our primary audience is New Zealanders. We are trying to upskill them. We are trying to raise their awareness of Latin America. But to do so, of course, we need to engage people like you, Latin Americans. We can't introduce New Zealanders to Latin Americans if we are not connected to you ourselves, and if we do not make the relationship beneficial to you. And so as a result, we are keen to engage with you. That's why we're here in this conference, and it's a delight to be here. Thank you for having us. As I said before, we're focused on raising the awareness and the capacity of New Zealanders to get to know your part of the world. So we're not a standard research centre or an international office. Our focus is not on student recruitment or student exchanges, although you will see that we do mobility. Rather, we try to transfer knowledge from academia to society. We try to build talent pipelines all the way from our primary schools, through our high schools, through our universities, through to business. La próxima, por favor. And by the way, I should say that we are giving this presentation in English, but if you wish at the end to ask your questions in Spanish, please do. We will respond accordingly. This slide here showing our objectives these are our mandated objectives. We were given this mission by our government funders. It is up to us to interpret it. So you'll see here the emphasis on New Zealanders, being prepared to do business and engage with you, to grow the awareness of Latin America in New Zealand. The three people presenting to you, two from New Zealand, one originally from the United States, and I do want to welcome not only Craig, but also Shannon Chang, our fellow presenter, who's been with us for a year. And whose accent, by the way, you may understand more easily than ours. We are all very deeply aware of Latin America. We've all lived in your part of the world. We all have been to Colombia. Shannon in particular has been in Colombia. Nevertheless, we're aware that most New Zealanders are not very aware of Latin America. So one of our challenges is to, as I say, put Latin America on the map. Make more New Zealanders think about it as a place to engage and do business. La próxima, por favor. So how do we do what we do? Well, we are given a certain amount of funding every year from our government, and we deliver various activities. We do specific initiatives, which we trial as pilots. They become projects, and then we try and scale them up into programs. So we are focused some of our programs and activity are specifically focused on Latin America. We have 5 specific countries. Colombia is one of them. And so is Chile, Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. If you're from beyond there, it does not mean we do not relate to you, but we're a small team, so we have to focus our efforts. Another thing we do is that we work hard to grow New Zealanders' awareness of the Asia-Pacific region more broadly. And yes, if you are from Brazil, you may think, well, we're not on the Pacific, but thankfully, government doesn't mind too much about that, and it lets us focus on Brazil and Argentina and other Atlantic coast nations as well. There are many things we could talk about that we do beyond the tertiary sector, because given what I said earlier, it's not just universities that we look at. We are looking at businesses, we're looking at the public education, primary and secondary education, and we have some various activities for the broader public. But because of this conference, naturally, we're going to focus the rest of this conversation on what we do for the tertiary sector.
Okay, thanks, Matthew.
My colleague.
Thanks, Matthew. So as in the LatAm conference, the key themes for this session and the conference around both developing global citizens, but also social impacts. So now we'll take you through some examples of some of our projects for our young people. So in terms of internships and networks, we have had a market insights program since 2018, and this is where tertiary students, university students, can intern in companies, particularly small businesses, for 12 weeks. And this is where they can share their market knowledge and their intercultural knowledge as well, including language skills, to support a company that is scoping, for example, to enter the market in Latin America. This has been successful in the sense of both for the students, it gives them this great opportunity to share what they know, but also its work experience as well within these companies. Here in the image, you can see the top image. This was one of the winners of our program last year. Who was working with a small company in Wellington, where we live, the capital of New Zealand, to as part of their scoping about working with a company in Colombia in Medellin, a Wellington gaming company called Pickpock. So very much tech industry, very much the now for us about what's important in terms of light exports and technology. The second point there, the Young Professionals Network. This is another initiative, a new initiative for us, where we've had a lot of young New Zealanders who've been to Latin America, both on our programs, also on the Prime Minister's Scholarship to Latin America, which is really exciting. This is with our partners, and hi to our Education New Zealand colleagues who are on this video as well. And also young New Zealanders who have taken themselves to the region as well, either as part of their own university programs, or they've just gone and traveled there by themselves. But a lot come back to New Zealand, and then to a degree there's a frustration, what do they do with what they've learned? And they all come back really excited about, wow, what an amazing experience. They'll fall in love with Latin America, but they have that zest and drive and wanting to continue working in Latin America. So we formed this Young Professionals Network with the Latin America New Zealand Business Council. And so you can see in the middle photo, this is the first meeting of an interim committee that we've set up with LANSBC, Latin America New Zealand Business Council, who are leading this. Their task, the committee's task, is to grow the network and get it underway. And the focus is about both providing an opportunity for young professionals and including students to build their capability and keep on building their capability. But many of these young people, they're already leaders in their own right. So we're very excited about where they can both take the network, grow the network, but also as they enter different companies where they may be working, and also that spreading influence about why Latin America is so important, how to work with Latin America, connections and so on. So pointing back to our primary mission and objectives that Matthew talked about, this is very much it's the central part of our mission, which is about providing opportunities, deepening connections, but also the knowledge and the ability to do business and to also apply research as part of our connection with Latin America. Below the creative sector, we know the orange economy is very important, also one of the key platforms of President Duque's work program in Colombia, also about this change in terms of knowledge economy, creative sector as being very important. That's of great interest to us in terms of both in New Zealand, where we know, for example, tech sector, film sector, gaming, as I've mentioned with Pickpock in Colombia, is very important. So, for example, we have this, you can see a picture of two academics here, Lee Davidson from Victoria University and Professor Leticia Perez from Mexico. We have a new internship program for the cultural sector. We have both young New Zealanders and Mexican students who are interning. And so this is a virtual internship, but also their collective focus is also about raising their intercultural competence and working, for example, in museums. But they will be also creating a small exhibition to promote greater knowledge and understanding of Mexico as well. So that's going to happen towards the end of the year. And thankfully, as part of our planning with COVID, that's a very virtual internship and approach to our work in the creative sector. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so in the past, we've also had cultural industries internships in Colombia, and this is with one of our consortium partner universities, University of Auckland. A group of students spent 3 months in Medellin, for example, and working in, for example, museums and media companies. And so once again, this is this very deep experience for them about how to work in Colombia, but also applying technical skills, their academic studies, but of course their life as well in terms of speaking Spanish, living, going to work on a daily basis. And once again, this very magical effect that, of course, came back as the greatest ambassadors, not only for Colombia, but also New Zealand, with this drive to keep on furthering their Spanish. their knowledge of Colombia and of Latin America, but also in terms of how to apply that in their lives as they go ahead. The second point there, the APEC Business Advisory Council, we did a project with the Chile Pacific Foundation. This was in preparation for APEC 2019, which unfortunately was cancelled. But we had a student intern who you can see in the top photo. She spent 6 months in Chile working at the Chile Pacific Foundation, supporting the preparation for APEC. This is a student who came from a non-traditional background in terms of she was very focused on sustainability, environment, and so on, but was then working in this trade environment. And it went over this huge change in her life in terms of understanding APEC, all of the lead up to APEC and the preparation from a private sector perspective, but also a very Chilean perspective as well. In the photo, you can see she also got the chance to go to an ABAC meeting in China. So very much about global citizen, global competence, but also in trade. Laura, who was the intern, she returned to New Zealand, did another internship with our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and has now undergone this huge change where she's really, really interested in inclusive trade, still with her strong environmental and sustainability principles, but also she's keeping on learning Spanish and wants to go back to Chile and do a master's degree. Third point there, Te Hononga Akiwa. This is strengthening Māori business capability and with our partners at the University of Waikato, one of our consortium partners. Here we've sent 2 groups to date to Latin America to be looking at how to do business from both mainstream perspectives, but also indigenous perspectives. There's been 2 trips to Chile to date. And so they've been very successful in the sense of this great awakeness, once again, a whole group of students falling in love with not only Chile, Latin America, but also very much wide in the indigenous way of thinking about what does this mean in modern terms and business terms, and where we go with this in the future. In the future, we were due to go to Brazil, which unfortunately won't happen, but we've created a domestic program where the students will still learn about how to do business in Brazil and be linking with partners in Brazil virtually and also doing a business challenge. So we've moved very quickly because we know there's a lot of interest and also a little bit of the X factor around New Zealand, Indigenous peoples and a whole society about where we're at in our processes of reconciliation, but also the economic power of what we call the Māori economy, and also how these young leaders also can influence how businesses do business with Latin America in the future and keep that at the center as part of our diversification of where we do trade. The last point there, entrepreneurship and innovation in Brazil and New Zealand. This is a project that we did with University of Sao Paulo. A group of New Zealand students went on this innovation program. And once again, studying about what does innovation and doing business mean in a place like Brazil and Sao Paulo, but also working with their student colleagues to be doing a business challenge. A group 2 of the Brazilian students from a winning team then came back to New Zealand, and the second part of this entrepreneurship and innovation program was the students looking at companies in New Zealand wanting to export to Latin America, already exporting there. Once again, highly successful in the sense of huge awakening awareness, but also that zest once again to continue developing global competence and their language skills as well, but once again, the technical skills. Next slide.
So, like the rest of the world, we are also prioritizing sustainability initiatives. This first project, the Antarctic Cities Youth Expedition, was us sending Caleb Frazier. He's the only guy on that top photo. So he is a tertiary student in New Zealand, and he was representing New Zealand in this expedition along with students from Chile, Argentina, Australia, and South Africa. And so the idea was that they went to Antarctica and they learned how to do research, what it's like to live on the base. And now the whole idea is they're going to come together and create the Antarctic Youth Coalition. The idea is that these 5 cities, gateway cities of these countries, are the closest to Antarctica. So they have the most stake in being custodians to Antarctica and protecting the future. And so they are doing different initiatives, rallying other young leaders, creating events to grow awareness of climate change. The next one is Winds of Change. This is a project that will happen this year. Originally, it was going to take New Zealand students to Chile, and then bring Chilean students to New Zealand. Obviously, that cannot happen anymore, but the whole idea is that they're going to create a network. So there will be 10 Kiwi students, 10 Chilean students in New Zealand, and 10 Chilean students who will connect virtually, and they will do a field experience in New Zealand, gather data, and create presentations from the field experience, and then join the larger climate change and sustainability network in New Zealand. And so the whole idea of this project is to build a partnership, a stronger partnership with Chile, given that it has so many similarities in terms of the environment and the landscape. So that is the focus for that one. And then the last one didn't happen, but the idea of this program it was bringing graduate students and undergraduate students together and taking them to the second World Environmental Law Congress in Brazil. And that was really also at the same thing, trying to expose law students that have a focus in environmental law to knowing how it is in Latin America and having them connect with other leaders.
And so also, we have also as part of our talent pipeline, we have a group of, we do programs with senior high school students aged between 17 and 18 years of age. So very much part of this talent pipeline that Matthew mentioned at the start. So our program is called LatAm Biz. This is where we work with our partners from Young Enterprise, an NGO in New Zealand that does entrepreneurship programs with around 4,000 high school students around New Zealand yearly. We go through selection processes with them. And we've sent 6 groups to date to Latin America, to Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, and Chile. And this is where the students spend a very intense 8 days, 7 to 8 days, visiting businesses to learn in a very deep way how to do business in these countries in Latin America, but Chile and so on, but also from New Zealand businesses and who are in business in Latin America as well. So we're kind of balancing this, these perspectives. What does it mean to be a Kiwi, a New Zealander operating in Latin America, realities, but also in terms of global competence. What does that mean in terms of changing gear, speaking Spanish or Portuguese, but also some of the technicalities and realities of doing business in such places in Latin America. They also do a business challenge as well, so it's very much a very intense experience. But once again, what's important for us is that what do we do with these young people? We call them globalistas. We didn't want to call them alumni, which is a time-honored word, but we wanted to really make it resonate with Latin America. We brought all of the people who've been to Latin America since 2017 together last year for a weekend business challenge. I'm supporting SMEs to be able to do market scoping. Great reunion, but once again, that amazing energy where up to 2 years on from when the first group had gone, about where they'd got to, but also ironically, the youngest group, which had only been to Argentina in early 2019, won the business challenge, and they were still at school at that point. So there's kind of that victory for the youngest, but also exciting in terms of this movement of people. We've talked about Young Professionals Network, and now with this group, our talent pipeline coming through of these 17 and 18-year-olds as well. And many of the groups that have been, they're now at university. So it's interesting to see in that journey about where they're going with that knowledge and what these peak experiences of a week, or in some of our programs, up to 2 weeks, how that's a huge life-changing experience, but how we were wanting to influence not only students studying international relations or languages, but also students from a wide variety of schools of studies to learn about Latin America, speak Spanish, speak Portuguese, and also influence the ways that we do our research, how our connections with Latin America. We featured 3 of our globalistas as well at an international education conference. So they do the speaking about what this experience has meant for them. Very popular conference, but also giving them, once again, that opportunity to present at a big conference about what global competence means in action, but also very much about Latin America as well from their perspective. Next slide.
Right, so These are examples of some of our language and culture programs. So Puertas Abiertas was originally designed to respond to the drop-off of students studying Spanish, but then not continuing with it. And so we wanted to be able to show students the opportunities and the professional pathways that learning Spanish presents. And so originally this was obviously going to take them to Latin America and have them do immersive experiences, but this is a perfect example of how we have had to revision our projects due to the new context. And so this program currently will be in person, but domestic. And so it will take students already studying Spanish, and each day there will be different topics. And so it's common to learn a language due to business. And so we want to show that there are other pathways that you can take when it's not just learning Spanish to do business with Latin America, but we have a session on education, we have a session on Latin American politics, on arts and culture. And so this really is a beautiful synergy between PhD students, academics, and students, because the academic will be designing the program, the PhD students will be delivering morning sessions, and then the students in the afternoon will be able to do a connect session to kind of connect together their learnings from the morning lessons and then apply it to real world experiences in the afternoon. And so they will be developing an action plan. So this action plan will have them be able to understand, you know, who they are, what their passions are, how they can utilize Spanish and have it kind of bolster their career path. Yeah, so Matthew.
Picking up from my colleague Shannon, our other item on this slide is an exhibit which really again blends different audiences. It's a synergy as well. This time, the person you see here is a Colombian artist, and it's sort of emblematic of how we sort of seek to leverage opportunities which are present in other sectors. In this instance, there's a art gallery in one of New Zealand's provincial towns, which is world famous for being sort of avant-garde, cutting edge in art. It is also Pacific Rim oriented, and fortunately for us, they do think of Latin America as part of the Pacific Rim. So they were going to have an exhibit from this Colombian artist called Nicolas Paras. What we thought we would do then is think, well, this is something which is happening in our cultural sector. How can we capitalize on it to achieve our other objectives and support this particular gallery? So what we did was we arranged for Nicolas with the gallery to give a program in the schools of the province, Taranaki. And so he actually introduced many Colombians to, many people from Taranaki to the culture of his country. And one of those students who he met also actually submitted a piece of work for a beautiful new publication we've just produced called Toi Toi, which is from New Zealand school students, written by students explaining their culture. And so one of the children was inspired to write by his visit. How does this connect to you, to the tertiary world? Well, this photograph here is him presenting to students at our own host university, Victoria University of Wellington. So we're looking for ways to capture imagination, to do things a little bit differently, and to spark interest. And I think that Nicolas spoke to, I think, over 3,000 people, and many people have seen his exhibit. La próxima, por favor.
So these two projects are bringing our university students into New Zealand schools. This first one is done in the South Island, and the idea is to take Latin Americans or Kiwi students who have been to Latin America and have extensive experience there into intermediate schools. And so the idea is to really open the eyes of children in New Zealand and show them the diversity of different cultures abroad, and get them to think about how differently people live in other places. And so the students will design and then deliver workshops all throughout the South Island. The second one is really is advanced level Spanish students entering classrooms. And this is to really assist teachers that may not have a language teaching background and might not have as much support in that area. And so it's taking them and having them design also as well lessons and being language assistants in the classroom. So we've gotten, it really allows them to experience that real world experience of what it would be like if they wanted to pursue a career in teaching language after their studies. And it also really grabs the students to have someone else beyond their teacher coming in and being passionate and dedicated to teaching them another language.
So everything we've said so far is really talking about fostering global citizens among the university sector. And we're talking primarily about students so far, but we haven't forgotten academics. I said at the start that we were not a research centre, so we're not, our goal when we work with academics is not to directly boost their research outputs, their publications. We are seeking to transfer their knowledge, and we are interested in applied research. So Craig, for example, joined an organisation, a visit organised by Education New Zealand to Latin America. But we ensured that every New Zealand university had the opportunity to go on this visit. Craig, do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
As Matthew said, to Colombia and to Brazil, I think what was interesting was that New Zealand universities traditionally haven't collaborated that much, in the sense that it's a pretty competitive model in terms of attracting domestic and international students. What was fantastic as part of this trip was this very much as a group about how to present research commercialization opportunities with New Zealand and Latin America, kind of learn off each other by being in Latin America together, but also clearly about presenting that opportunity to our academics and senior managers about, in Colombia and Brazil, about what opportunities there are for the commercialization of great research in New Zealand, but then vice versa as well. So it was very much about opening up the eyes of the group about, of course, about Latin America and the two countries, but very much in depth with CCYK, which is the Colombian group of universities around doing something similar, but also in Brazil with specific organizations like universities like Universidade de Sao Paulo, which obviously is huge. So once again, for New Zealand, that opportunity in terms of what research has been done there, what commercialization activities have been done, but critically the vice versa, what are we doing as well, and how do the connections, the relationships, and that knowledge provide greater opportunities for us. Matthew, back to you.
So we work with a variety of universities. There's just been a question come in about, are there areas of research that we're particularly interested in? Well, the ones we've identified so far are research commercialization, because again, that's beautiful. That's at the knowledge, that's at the intersection between universities and business. We have to be relevant, but both the education and the business sector. And that's so far primarily been with USP, the University of Sao Paulo. We're also, however, working with colleagues at the Catholic University of Chile on looking at the trade environment, looking at issues such as US-China rivalry, how do small nations cope with COVID? So we'd welcome discussion around how we can support that context. This is something often only of interest to diplomats, but it affects us all. Trade deals like the Pacific Alliance, for example, and how New Zealand's located with that. We also have other collaborations with other universities around language, and as we said before in Shannon's presentation, we've got a growing interest in sustainability. So if your university is interested in that, we'd be happy to talk with you. So these are areas I think which will grow, especially the SDGs. I think that's fundamental. New Zealand does well, as you're probably aware, in the Times Higher Education impact rankings extremely well in this area. So it's also relevant to students, and it does connect us. We're always looking for organic connections, especially pre-existing ones, but sort of below the radar between New Zealand and Latin America. And we share a lot in common environmentally, not just Antarctica, as we said before, but marine science, primary pastoral agriculture, and many of us are located on the same ring of fire with seismic energy, earthquakes, that sort of thing. So we're looking for the natural world connections. Another point though too is that when we talk about, we say targeted academic engagement, we talk about, obviously, if our goal is not primarily about research publications, then we work best with academics who are interested in the broader social mission, the third mission of universities and their social impact. And our photograph here is of a colleague who's done virtual reality tourism project in Machu Picchu, and here he's demonstrating it to the Peruvian ambassador. And we took this project into schools. Now, Christian has just won an award in our university for his commitment to the environment. So he's someone who kind of lives and breathes the third mission of academia, as well as being a fine researcher and teacher. So those people are our natural partners within the university world. And there are others I could mention, but they don't all have that expertise in VR. So I thought I'd give that as an example. Okay, so there was a question too about how we're projecting our collaborations for the second part of 2020 and 2021. And so I'll answer that question in this slide. We, of course, have had to reassess our plan. We've got annual funding, so we always have to do, and we're paid for, we're funded by government, so everything is quite scrutinized, and there's a lot of paperwork around this. And so our plan, every year we do a plan, every year our plan is approved, but this time it was approved with a condition because it said, well, how are you going to respond to COVID? The main way we're doing so is not going to be a surprise to this audience. We're putting as much activity as we can online. We are, or if not fully online, then blended. But we're also, and I think you might have heard this before in this presentation, if we cannot travel to Latin America, we're traveling to Latin America from New Zealand and within New Zealand. So you heard before that we've got mobility activity. Well, we've converted that. Rather than say taking New Zealanders to Latin America to see a New Zealand firm in Latin America, we'll take them to their New Zealand headquarters in New Zealand and talk about Latin America from here. Or like everyone else, we'll do webinars, or we'll try and access Latin American students in New Zealand. New Zealand would love more Latin American students, and there are already some, so connect to them. Connect to the communities, the migrant communities. They may be people who came to New Zealand 40 plus years ago as refugees, or they may be New Zealanders who came 4 months ago as tech sector workers. So we're not letting the absence of travel stop us doing our mission. The other thing we're doing is we're having a lot of dialogues with our government stakeholders and our other stakeholders about the new reality in which we find ourselves. So we are looking very much at making sure that what we do is independent, because we are based in universities, we have academic freedom, but nevertheless relevant to what the other New Zealand government agencies are doing and relevant to the new context. So we're constantly reassessing, and as you may have heard, New Zealand was free for over 100 days from community transmission of COVID. It no longer is. So we might have to reconvert our reconverted program a little bit more next week. We're all waiting for news on that tonight. But regardless of whether we can move out of our houses or move out of our borders, we're going to engage with Latin America. And indeed, possibly the need to do so is even greater right now because we do expect trade and people movement to be at best interrupted for the next year or possibly longer. And so we need to leave a legacy of greater interest. And that's why it's so great that we can work across all these different age groups because, that book I showed you before is about to become an app and a website. We're also developing a digital game for primary school students. We're preparing New Zealanders to engage with Latin America immediately if they can, and in the future if they can't engage immediately. So where does this leave us? We have had funding for 3 years. We've got some more funding. So we're trying to scale up our activities. We had to work out in our first 3 years, how we were going to fulfill that mandated set of objectives we had. We've kind of done that, and now we're looking to scale up activities. We are looking at, like our other centres, and the other centres, here are our 3 logos. The other centres are the North Asia Centre in blue and Southeast Asia in the sort of ochre colour. We're also going to try and see what activity we can do together. We already do some together. We're going to step that up. We are very keen, as I said before, on making sure that what we do contributes in any small way or any large way or any transformative way to New Zealand's own recovery from COVID. We're funded by governments. We've got to help that broader effort. Our society, your societies, this is going to be #1 business for everyone. So how can we play our small part? But coming back to sort of how we began this presentation, we can't do that role if what we do is we think is relevant to Latin America, but Latin America doesn't think it's relevant at all. And so this is why we need to talk to you and speak to you and find out what are your needs and interests. I mean, can we, in a modest way, help you, help your countries recover from COVID? First, endure COVID, get through COVID, and then what's the post-COVID scenario? So at this point, what we'd like to do is open it up for questions. I think I've answered 2 which came in, but let's have a look let's open the chat function and see what other ones we have here. And Craig and Shannon, please, by all means, feel free to chip into these. I hope I've answered the first 2 from Mary and from... Oh, Craig responded to that. That's great. And so Mary had both those questions. Are there any other questions which people would like to raise?
Sorry. So before we get into that, Matthew,
apologies.
No worries. I just wanted to explain to everyone how to keep up with our work and how to engage with us. So here are, I'll just leave the screen like this. Here are our personal emails. And then obviously on the right-hand side, this is all of our social media. In our social media, we update, we promote different events. We kind of let people know what we're working on. But if you want a more comprehensive update, then sign up for our newsletters on our website, latamcape.org.nz/connect. And then we'll send about a newsletter every 2 months, and it'll give you more of an idea of what we're working on at the time. But take it away.
Okay, there were 2. Thank you, Javier. You've reminded us 2 questions on the desktop application. What's been the key learning for New Zealand when working for LatAm universities? One, I think there's interest in engaging would be my primary response. When we've reached out to Latin America, we've only done so, we've only begun to do so, really. Nevertheless, there has been a strong response. People are happy to engage with us. We've had Los Andes in Colombia and Iapit in Colombia working with us, and no one has ever actually said, we're not really interested. So, because I think Latin American universities have responded well to the programs that we've offered, and seen them as relevant to their students. Because often what we do, we don't just, when we could send people abroad, we didn't just kind of send them as tourists. Often we would ask them to engage with Latin American peers. That's what we did with our entrepreneurship and innovation program with Brazil, for example. We sent some students to Brazil, but we also sent some students from Brazil back to New Zealand for part 2 of it. So we, while we are obliged to focus on New Zealanders, we want Latin Americans to benefit from this as well. And the second question, what's the most popular learning destination for New Zealanders right now? Well, Javiera from Education New Zealand may be able to correct me on this, but my understanding is that New Zealanders still traditionally tend to focus on English-speaking countries, and historically go to the US and UK, and to a lesser extent Australia. It's actually a challenge for a lot of our universities, not just the 4 universities in the consortium, but all our universities, to get their young students who are interested in travel to go to locations beyond the US and Europe. And, that's, again, when you think about why we were created, it was, maybe to sort of fill that gap, fill that deficit, get New Zealanders more interested in going a little bit beyond the status quo. New Zealanders are great travelers. We have something called the OE, the overseas experience, where, because we're so far away, frankly, from the rest of the world, it's almost like a rite of passage that when you finish university, you go and spend 2 years. But traditionally, people have done that as tourists, 2 years abroad, often in Europe, sometimes in Asia. We've done that as tourists. In terms of students going abroad, it's only really the pioneers who go to Latin America on Prime Minister scholarships from Education New Zealand. And so we're trying to grow more of an interest there. Hopefully that answered those questions. Craig or Shannon, any other comments you wish to make at the moment? Oh, sorry, here's one which has just come in from Gonzalo. Craig, do you want to take this one, or Shannon, do you want to do this?
Yeah, I'm just reading it, so just give me 1 second to just getting through it. Thanks, Gonzalo, for the question.
Oh, I'll pick it up if you. I can do this one. Yeah, it would be good to invite Air New Zealand to do this. Air New Zealand is our national airline, and correct, you're correct. It's Star Alliance is the partnership. I think it would be the appropriate entity to talk about that would possibly be Education New Zealand, and they would arrange a sort of deals in a sense that while we are managed by 4 universities, we don't represent them per se. So our ability to negotiate this is directly, we can't do that, but we could obviously speak to Air New Zealand, and we could also speak to our Universities New Zealand or Education New Zealand about this. Javiera from Education New Zealand, who obviously we work closely with, and we're grateful to her for having set up this opportunity for us to be part of LACHEC. She's noted that the most popular destination for New Zealanders are these 4 countries named. And the PMSLA is the Prime Minister's Scholarship for Latin America. It really is important because what it does is it takes the talented young people and again, the ones who think a little bit outside the square and gives them an immersion experience. Universities have their own exchange relationships with Latin American universities too. And so I think on our radar is the idea of not only integrating them into our young professionals network, which Craig talked about, but also thinking, well, what about the New Zealanders who stay in Latin America or their Latin American friends? Is there a possibility of some form of alumni network of New Zealanders and their friends in these 4 countries and elsewhere in Latin America?
Yeah, Matthew, I'll just jump in there. I think also what's important to say is that for us about putting Latin America more on the radar of New Zealanders who have traditionally thought, as Matthew said, of Europe, United States, Australia, English-speaking countries, and then more latterly about Asia, given the big push in terms of trade with China particularly, but throughout North Asia and Southeast Asia, but also that reframing of our place where we see ourselves in the world, about New Zealand, the Asia-Pacific region, and not just thinking linearly towards Latin America or towards Asia, but also as an Asia-Pacific region as well. So that's what we're saying as much for the students in terms of looking at Latin America for opportunities, not just for exotic travel, but about study, about work, and why it's important to speak Spanish and Portuguese, and or Portuguese. And that's what we're seeing is that growing movement as well, where traditionally New Zealanders haven't been good at both learning languages or even necessarily valuing our First Nations language. But we can see this change happening now with growing numbers of New Zealanders going to Latin America, Prime Minister's scholarship holders coming back, but also coming back to apply that knowledge. And that's a critical part of our mission about both the connections, working in with our, what we call our NZ Inc. partners. That means with Kaviera, Education New Zealand and colleagues, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So we're all working in very closely together. And I'd say it's probably an advantage for us given we are a small nation, but also a group of colleagues that collaborate very closely, but also to be really stepping up around Latin America opportunities and also our talent pipelines, and to get people over there and to be thinking about what that means now in terms of digital relationships given these COVID times.
Thanks, Craig. I think that too, that one of the novel things about our consortium, our centre, is that we are part of a consortium. And so happy to talk offline about what that means, because if we have 4 of New Zealand's universities involved in and there are only 8 in this enterprise, so we've got to make sure that each of them feel a stake in it too. So we're always trying to balance the needs of programs versus participants versus stakeholders, and try and achieve the best possible outcome. And as I said before, we all are trying to leverage the sense that working with the other CAPEs, the other centres of Asia Pacific Excellence, to try and do common activity. Of less interest to Colombia, but certainly of Mexico and Peru and Chile, is that, for instance, next year New Zealand will be the virtual host of the big APEC conference. This was going to be obviously an in-person event, and it was going to be a huge focus for our government and to a lesser degree civil society. Well, it's now going online, but it will still be important, and so we'll try and leverage this Asia Pacific consciousness, because if New Zealanders, our starting position is New Zealanders should know more about Latin America. We love and value and respect your part of the world. We want more of our compatriots to do so. And so one way to do so is to make New Zealand part of get New Zealanders thinking a little bit differently about the broader Asia Pacific, and to include Latin America in that. Shannon, we're almost at time. Any final thoughts from you? Or we may, if not, we may sign off soon to our Colombian friends. I mean, Shannon, you've lived in Colombia. You've done work there. How do you think the work that we're doing kind of helps you express what you used to do in Colombia?
Yeah. A perfect segue. I always say that Colombia changed my life because it allowed me to think of the world differently and think of what I knew differently. I come from an Asian background, but I grew up in the US. And so Latin America just threw kind of like a wrench in the works, and it allowed me to really question and be able to deeply, I guess, profoundly kind of reassess what life was for me. And so I think that's when we're talking about rewiring higher education, you know, and we have had to change so many things due to COVID, but I think that at least in this era, we can all, you know, there's more opportunity to reflect. And so I think that that's the value of what our center does. And I think what of all universities do, it allows, you know, those in higher education, those in university to start to be able to think about their position in the world. And I think that's how we grow a more, you know, globally aware and more conscious society. So yeah, I mean, hola, mis colombianos. I miss it all the time, and I'm so glad that I've been able to find an opportunity in New Zealand to continue sharing the passion that I have for Latin America and all that Colombia had really given me. Yeah.
Gracias, Colombia. Craig, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and thanks, Shannon. I think that zest we all have, but great with Shannon on the team now as well. But that whole, what we're seeing with the Young Professionals Network of a growing group of people who want to come up with solutions, collaborate, you know, to these big challenges with other societies, but also in terms of to shift on that in these challenging times, but increasingly in a digital environment. How do we do that? And so. Having these very strong connections but not just connections for connection's sake, but what do we do with the connections? How to create social impact for First Nations people, businesses, but in our talent pipeline, still providing opportunities. So in some ways it is about relearning as well in this very changed world, but that's what we're excited about because, for example, with the Young Professionals Network, but what we saw with the research commercialization visit to Colombia and Brazil, you see this growing group of people about getting that lived experience and also to motivate people to keep on learning, and that's contingent on us and with our partners like Education New Zealand. How do we keep on providing opportunities so that people keep on learning about Latin America, greater awareness, greater knowledge, apply that knowledge for impact. So, and of course, as we know with this conference, global citizens and how we all do this together. So I'll just say kia ora and muchísimas gracias, muito obrigado. Fantastic to see you all as part of this session. And we look forward to you contacting us and hearing from you as well. I'll pass back now to Matthew.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's been lovely talking to you, and we're happy you now have our emails, happy to reach out. Muchísimas gracias. Espero lo mejor por su conferencia. And look forward to keeping in touch with you. And it's a great opportunity. We can look forward to continuing to engage. From here, buenas noches. From you, buenos días. Gracias.
Gracias.
Gracias. Chao, chao.
Muchas gracias a todos nuestros participantes, a nuestros asistentes, a nuestros conferencistas. Los esperamos en un par de horas para nuestras siguientes sesiones de la tarde. Una feliz tarde para todos y a nuestros colegas de Nueva Zelanda. Espero que puedan dormir un poquito ahora. Hasta luego a todos. Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Chao, chao.